Welcome to the world of science fiction where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The sky burned crimson as Commander Vera's warship tore through Earth's atmosphere, trailing smoke and dying flames. Her claws dug into the cracked console, her amber eyes flashing with fury. "Human filth," she hissed. The Krith Empire had sent her to glass this wretched planet, to wipe out the last resistance. But a lucky missile strike had sent her crashing down instead. The impact shattered her world into darkness. When she awoke, pain seared through her ribs. The scent of blood and ash filled the air. She snarled, forcing herself up, only to freeze. A human stood over her, tall, broad-shouldered, his face streaked with dirt and a fresh cut across his brow. He held a rifle, but it wasn't aimed at her. Instead, he extended a hand. "You alive, or do I gotta drag you?" Vera recoiled. Kale. His name tag was barely readable, but his voice was rough, tired. A soldier, like her, but weaker. Human. She spat at his feet. "Touch me, and I'll rip your throat out." Kale didn't flinch. He just sighed, wiping his face. "Yeah, figured. But if you want alive, we gotta move. The Krith bombardment starts in 6 hours, and this valley's ground zero." Vera's blood ran cold. Her own people would kill her if they found her here. Traitor or not, she was collateral damage now. She glared at Kel. "Why save me?" He shrugged, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "Maybe I'm an idiot. Or maybe—" His gaze hardened. "You know how to stop this war." A beat. The wind howled between them. Then, with a growl, Vera took his hand. The wind howled through the skeletal remains of the city, carrying dust and the distant echoes of war. Vera kept her distance from Kale, her claws flexing at her sides. Every instinct screamed that this was a mistake, trusting a human, walking beside one as if they weren't sworn enemies. Yet here she was. Kale moved ahead, scanning the rubble with sharp eyes. He moved like a soldier, efficient, cautious. But there was something else in the way he stepped over debris, something she couldn't name. "Care," she sneered. "You're slowing us down." He didn't look back. "And you're bleeding." Vera glanced at her side. A shard of metal from the crash was still embedded in her armor, leaking dark blue blood. She'd ignored it. Pain was nothing. Kale stopped, shrugging off his pack. "Let me see it." "No." He rolled his eyes. "You'll die of infection before your empire even bombs us. Sit." She bared her fangs. "I don't need your help." "Yeah." He tossed a small medkit onto the broken pavement between them. "Then fix it yourself." For a long moment, they stared at each other, golden alien eyes locked with human defiance. Finally, with a snarl, she sat. Cal's hands were steady as he worked. He didn't flinch when she growled, didn't hesitate when she tensed. Just cleaned the wound, removed the shard, and sealed it with a practiced touch. Vera watched him closely. "You've done this before." He smirked, but there was no humor in it. "War's been going on a long time." She studied his face, the scars, the shadows under his eyes. Humans were fragile, yes, but this one had survived. "Why fight?" she asked suddenly. "Your planet is lost. Your people are dying. Why not surrender?" Cal's fingers stilled for just a second before he finished bandaging her. Then he leaned back, meeting her gaze. "Because we don't know how to give up." Night fell like a shroud over the ruins. They took shelter in the husk of an old building, the walls barely standing. Kale lit a small fire, the flickering light casting shadows across his face. Vera sat as far from him as possible, sharpening a piece of wreckage into a blade. "Your fire will draw attention. It'll also keep the predators away." He tossed her a ration pack. "Eat." She caught it, sniffed it, then grimaced. "Disgusting." "Welcome to Earth." Silence settled between them, broken only by the crackling fire. Then, "You have family?" Kale asked. Her grip tightened on the makeshift blade. No. Liar. She hissed. You know nothing about me. I know warriors don't fight for nothing. He poked the fire with a stick. So who are you fighting for? Vera's chest burned. She shouldn't answer. Shouldn't even be talking to him. But the words came anyway. My sister. She was killed in the first human-Krith battle. Kale was quiet for a long time. Then, I'm sorry. She laughed, sharp and bitter. You're sorry. Your people fired the shot. And mine died too. He looked up, his eyes reflecting the firelight. War doesn't pick sides, Vera. It just takes. She had no answer for that. Dawn came too soon. Kale was already moving, packing what little supplies they had. Vera watched him, something uneasy curling in her chest. This human, he was supposed to be weak. Supposed to be beneath her. But he wasn't. And that terrified her more than the war ever had. The sound of engines tore through the morning sky. Vera's head snapped up, her instincts screaming. Krith patrol ships. Kale cursed, shoving supplies into his pack. They're scanning the area. If they find us, they'll kill you, Vera finished coldly, and take me back for execution. Their eyes locked, understanding passing between them in an instant. Run or fight? Kale asked, already gripping his rifle. Vera bared her teeth. Fight. They moved like shadows through the ruins, Kale leading the way through collapsed buildings and shattered streets. The patrol ships circled like vultures, their search beams cutting through the dust. Vera pressed against a crumbling wall, her claws flexing. They'll land soon. They'll want to confirm the wreckage. Kale nodded, checking his ammo. Then we hit them first. She studied him, the set of his jaw, the steadiness in his hands. You're not afraid. He smirked, terrified. But that's never stopped me before. Something hot and unfamiliar flared in her chest. Before she could name it, the first ship descended. The fight was brutal. Kale took out 2 Krith scouts with precise shots, his human reflexes sharper than they had any right to be. Vera tore through the others, her claws and fury making up for her lack of weapons. But they were outnumbered. A blast sent Kale crashing into the rubble, his rifle skidding out of reach. A Krith soldier loomed over him, weapon raised. Vera moved without thinking. She lunged, tackling the soldier to the ground, her claws ripping into armor. The Krith screamed, but she didn't stop until he lay still beneath her. Silence. Then, you saved me. Kale's voice was rough with disbelief. Vera stared at her bloodied hands, her breath coming hard. She had just killed one of her own. For a human, what was she becoming? Night fell again. They didn't dare light a fire this time, hiding instead in the hollowed-out shell of an old transport truck. Kale's leg was injured, not badly, but enough to make him grit his teeth with every step. Vera watched him in the dim light, her thoughts a storm. You need to rest, she muttered. Can't. He shifted, wincing. We need to keep moving. She growled, suddenly furious. You'll slow us down if you push it. Then leave me. The words hung between them, sharp as a blade. Vera's fists clenched. No. Kale looked up, surprised. She didn't understand it herself, but the thought of walking away, of leaving him behind, made something in her chest twist painfully. I don't abandon allies, she lied. Cal's lips curved, just slightly. Allies, ah. She didn't answer. The next morning, Cal's fever spiked. Vera cursed as she pressed a hand to his forehead. Infection. Stupid human biology. He chuckled weakly. Yeah, we're real fragile. She scowled, rummaging through their supplies. You need medicine. Not exactly a pharmacy around here. She hesitated, then reached into her armor's hidden compartment, pulling out a small vial of Krith battlefield serum, the last of her personal supply. Cal's eyes widened. You've had that this whole time. Shut up and drink it. He took the vial, his fingers brushing hers. A spark passed between them, Literal, physical, like static from the dry air. Their eyes met. Something shifted. The serum worked fast. By nightfall, Kale was sitting up, his strength returning. Vera sat across from him, sharpening her claws against a piece of metal. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was charged. "Why did you save me?" Kale asked suddenly. She didn't look up. "I told you. Allies." "Bullshit." Her claws stilled. Kale leaned forward, his voice dropping. "You could have let me die back there. Could have gone back to your people. But you didn't." Vera's pulse pounded in her ears. "Maybe I have my reasons." "Like what?" She finally met his gaze and saw something there that stole her breath. Heat. Challenge. Want. Her voice came out a whisper. "Maybe I'm tired of fighting alone." The space between them vanished. His lips were warm. Human. Perfect. Vera kissed him back like a woman starving, her claws digging into his shoulders, his hands tangling in her hair. It was madness. It was war. It was the only thing that had ever made sense. When they broke apart, breathless, Cal's smile was brighter than any star. "Guess we're more than allies now." Vera didn't argue. The first sign was the nausea. Vera woke with a lurch, bile rising in her throat. She barely made it outside before retching into the dirt, her body trembling. Impossible. Cal was at her side in an instant, his hand warm on her back. "You okay?" She wiped her mouth, her mind racing. "It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. She knew. Krith females only got sick like this for one reason. Pregnancy. Her claws dug into the earth. No. Krith and humans weren't compatible. They couldn't be. Yet her body betrayed her. She counted back the weeks, the feverish nights tangled with Kale, the way her skin had burned under his touch. "Stars help me." She didn't tell them. Not when they scavenged the next ruined town. Not when they huddled together for warmth under the twin moons. She told herself she was waiting for certainty. But the truth. She was terrified. What would he say? What would he do? What would she? The answer came sooner than she wanted. They were resting in an old bunker when Kale suddenly froze, his head tilting. "You hear that?" Vera's ears twitched. Distant engines. Many of them. "Krith dropships," she whispered. "A full battalion." Kale paled. "They're not just scanning anymore. They're invading." Her stomach twisted. And not just from the child growing inside her. Her people were coming. And they would slaughter every human in their path. Including Kale. They ran. Through the ruins, through the skeletal forests, Vera pushing her body harder than she ever had. But something was wrong. She was slower. Dizzy. Kale noticed. Of course he did. "Vera, you're shaking." He caught her arm as she stumbled. "What's going on?" She yanked away. "Keep moving." "Not until you tell me what's wrong." The words tore out of her like a wound. "I'm carrying your child, you fool." Silence. Absolute, crushing silence. Cal's face went blank with shock. Then, a smile. A laugh. He grabbed her face, his eyes blazing. "You're serious?" She snarled. "This isn't a joke. My people will kill you for this. Kill us. Then we fight." His thumbs brushed her cheeks, impossibly gentle. "We fight for this. For her. Her." Cal's grin turned crooked. Just a feeling. Vera wanted to scream, to rage, to run. But then his hand slid down, resting over her stomach, and something inside her broke. "We can't win," she whispered. "We don't have to." Kale pressed his forehead to hers. "Just survive. That's what humans do best." She closed her eyes. For the first time in her life, Commander Vera of the Krith Empire prayed, "Let me keep them safe." The Krith warships darkened the sky like a storm. Vera stood at the edge of the ruined city, her claws flexing, her body thrumming with something new. Not just fury, but purpose. Kale loaded his rifle beside her, his jaw set. They'll hit the city first. We've got maybe 10 minutes. She nodded, her hand drifting to her stomach. Our daughter. Then she made a decision. No. Kale frowned. What? We don't run. She turned, her golden eyes burning. We fight back. They found the human resistance hidden deep in the city's underbelly, a ragtag group of soldiers and survivors, their faces gaunt but their eyes fierce. When Vera walked in, weapons raised. That's a Krith. Kale stepped forward. She's with me. A scoff. And we're just supposed to trust her. Vera bared her fangs, then slammed a stolen Krith data drive onto the table. This has their attack routes, weak points in their fleet. She looked at each human in turn. I can show you how to bring them down. Silence. Then, why? An old soldier asked. Why betray your own? Vera didn't hesitate. Because they'll kill my child. It was madness. Humans and a rogue Krith commander attacking an empire. But Vera fought like a demon unleashed. She tore through Krith lines, her claws dripping blue, her voice roaring commands in both languages. Kale was at her side, his rifle never missing. Left flank, he shouted. She pivoted, slicing through a soldier's armor. They're retreating. But then, a searing pain in her side. She looked down. A plasma bolt. Direct hit. Kale's scream was raw. Vyra. She woke in smoke and blood. Kale crouched over her, his hands pressing hard on her wound. Stay with me. Beyond him, the battle rage. The humans were losing. Vera coughed, blue staining her lips. The ship. What? Their command ship. She gripped his wrist. Take me there. Kale's face paled. You'll die. No. She forced herself up, her vision swimming. I'll end this. They boarded under cover of chaos. The Krith commander spun as they entered the bridge, his eyes widening. Traitor. Vera lunged, not at him, but at the ship's core. The reactor. Kale realized too late. Vyr. Nino. She turned, just once. Met his eyes. Tell her about me. Then she plunged her claws into the console. The explosion lit the sky for miles. Kale fell to his knees in the rubble, the surviving humans gasping around him. The Krith fleet scattered, leaderless. She'd done it. A hand touched his shoulder, the old resistance fighter. We won. Kale didn't answer. He was staring at the sunrise, and the tiny blue-skinned infant in his arms. Their daughter. Alive. Perfect. The child giggled as she chased butterflies through the meadow. Kale watched from the porch, his heart full. Mama's stories again, he called. The little girl nodded, her golden eyes bright. Tell me how she flew into the sky like a star. Kale smiled and began the tale.